Let's just start with this quote, because it really cuts right to the heart of the matter. For the government in Iran, this isn't just another conflict. We're talking about a fight for their very survival. The stakes couldn't be higher, and it's pulling the entire region right into the middle of it. So, what started out as a pretty direct confrontation is now dragging an entire region to the edge. We're going to break down exactly how this war is shifting, how it's expanding, and, what that really means for everyone caught in the middle. Okay, so in the beginning, this whole thing kicked off as a very intense, direct clash. You had Iran on one side and an Israeli-US alliance on the other. But before we get into all the strategy and the big picture, we have to talk about the human cost, because it's absolutely devastating. Think about this for a second. In just the first 4 weeks of fighting, nearly 2,000 people were killed inside Iran. And that's not just some abstract statistic, right? Every single one of those numbers represents a family torn apart, a community shattered. The conflict took a brutal and immediate toll on the ground. And you can learn a lot by just looking at what's being targeted. Of course, you have strikes on steel plants, that's a huge blow to Iran's economy, and on heavily guarded nuclear sites, but it goes way deeper than that. A massive water facility was hit, a 10,000 cubic meter reservoir, and on top of that, residential areas are being struck pretty much daily. It just shows you that this war is being waged far beyond any traditional military targets. And really, this quote from someone on the ground says it all. While governments and armies are making their strategic moves, it's ordinary people who are paying the ultimate price, day in and day out. This is the grim reality that's the backdrop for everything else that happens. So, just as everyone was trying to get a handle on the sheer intensity of this two-sided conflict, the entire strategic map was about to be completely redrawn. A brand new player was getting ready to jump into the fight, and it would change everything. And this was the question on everybody's mind, right? With Iran under such immense pressure, was one of its allies going to step in? Well, the answer to that question would turn this from a bilateral struggle into a regional powder keg. And there it is. Yemen's Houthi forces officially enter the war. This was a massive, massive escalation. It opened up a third, totally unpredictable front, and it was the clearest signal yet that this war was no longer contained. Now, Iran's allies in Yemen, the Houthis, didn't just bring more firepower. They brought a whole new strategy to the table: economic warfare. And in our world today, that is an incredibly powerful weapon. By launching missiles at a key port like Eilat and disrupting traffic in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is like a vital artery for global trade, they can literally choke supply chains. The goal here is to paralyze key parts of Israel's economy, like car imports, without ever having to win a conventional battle. So, with the Houthis in the game, the ripple effects just started spreading out, and fast. This was no longer a story about Iran and Israel. The entire Gulf region was now being pulled into the vortex, and global powers were being forced to react. The scale of this escalation is just staggering. We're talking about more than 5,000 missiles, drones, and cruise missiles targeting the Gulf since this whole thing started. The airspace over the region has basically become a constant battlefield. And think about this. Not a single country in the Gulf has been spared. From the UAE and Saudi Arabia all the way to Kuwait and Oman, alarms are going off. Air defense systems are lighting up the night sky. The thing that officials feared from the very beginning, a wide regional conflict, is now a reality. And in response, what do you see? Both sides are doubling down. The U.S. is moving in major hardware like the USS Tripoli carrying 2,500 Marines, but at the exact same time, Iran's allies are ramping up their own attacks. Hezbollah launched 250 projectiles in just one day, and groups in Iraq are actively going after U.S. interests. It's just a very dangerous cycle of escalation. So with the whole region hurtling towards an even wider war, you have to ask, is there any way out? Behind the scenes, there's this frantic search for some kind of diplomatic off-ramp, but it's all happening while the fighting gets more and more dangerous by the hour. And one of the things that makes any peace effort so difficult is public opinion. Inside Israel, support for the war is overwhelming. Polls are showing something like 78% of people backing the government's actions. Now, there are some small anti-war movements, but the political pressure is clearly overwhelmingly in favor of continuing the fight. And here is where you see a huge point of tension, even among allies. The US and Israel, they don't actually want the same thing. The United States is pushing for de-escalation, for a ceasefire, but Israel's stated goal It's much more absolute. The total dismantling of Iran's nuclear program, its missile program, its entire military. Those are two very, very different endgames. But in Pakistan, we are seeing what might be the very fragile first steps of a path to diplomacy. It all starts with building trust. That's a key demand from Iran. Then you see these small confidence-building measures, like allowing some Pakistani ships through the Strait of Hormuz. The big picture goal is to eventually bring in regional heavy hitters like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt to try and broker a real plan to stop the fighting. And that leaves us here at this terrifying crossroads. You've got these two forces on a collision course. On one track, you have military escalation, new fronts opening up, and a region basically on fire. And on the other, you have this incredibly fragile, high-stakes diplomatic effort that could fall apart at any second. So the question isn't just if one of them is going to break, but when, and what happens to the entire region when it does.